Today on the Wrestling Roundtable, the best and worst of the Royal Rumbles and the best and worst comebacks. Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. Last week it was an all-show review edition. This week it's a best and worst edition, as we're doing the best and worst of the Royal Rumbles and the best and worst comebacks before we get down to business, of course. Introducing the panel, sitting to my left, which is your right, is Jason Aleto, fan of 23 years, and sitting to my right, which is your left, Will Vafidez, independent wrestler and fan of 20 years, and Rodney LeConte, director of the Grappling Kings, videographer, and a fan of 21 years. And before we move on to the worst, because we're starting off getting the negativity out of the way, worst matches, moments, and overall shows, we want to remind you to join us on WrestlingRoundtable.com, and thank you for watching us on YouTube, iTunes, and Go Fight Live. Wherever you're watching us, make sure to subscribe and rate, and thank you for watching. So, best and worst. Something that's been a staple of the Wrestling Roundtable since the beginning. Sometimes we want to have fun with our topics, and I think the Royal Rumble is one of them. We're a little late. We missed the Royal Rumble last month, so I guess this is kind of a makeup in a way to go over the history of the Royal Rumble. And because it's fun, it's one of the pay-per-views everyone looks forward to every year, because the Rumble match is pretty fun. Let's get the negativity out of the way first, and let's start with the worst moments of the Royal Rumble. What stands out to you?
The pose down with the Ultimate Warrior and Rick Rude. Again, Warrior being into the Warrior and only the Warrior, never really sells it. Rick Rude, of course, does everything he can to really sell it. That, to me, was really horrible. There was no point. It was a fill-in. It didn't really matter about the pose down. It was just to build them up for WrestleMania 5.
Oh, just to build them up for WrestleMania 5.
Yeah.
So it had a purpose. Mae Young showing her tits in 2000 had zero purpose.
Oh,
2001, 1 year after this guy debuted, Taz comes in the Royal Rumble and within seconds gets eliminated by Kane. I wanted to put my head through the TV screen. Are you kidding me?
I had my remote in my hand, ready to shove it into the wall. I was like, motherfucker.
Are you kidding me? Taz,
Yeah, that was a bad one. Dino Bravo, 1988. Dino Bravo had a weightlifting exhibition, I guess you want to call it, with Jesse the Body Ventura and Frenchie Martin in the middle of this Royal Rumble card, the first ever Royal Rumble card. I thought it was a big waste of time. Dino Bravo couldn't even get the bar off his chest on the last lift, the record-breaking lift, and Jesse Ventura had to lift it up off him. I thought it was a terrible waste of time and horrible.
Sounds like so far you guys don't like watching a lot of beefed up muscle guys posing.
No.
Anyway, I think also about 2001 because it reminds me of when they did the fake injury stinger angle with Chyna and Ivory, who was in the RTC at the time. Mm-hmm. It was one of the first instances that I remember of them using what's been referred to as the Owen voice for something fake. Yeah. When they start doing, oh, Chyna might be really injured and this is a serious injury. And it was fucking terrible looking on top of that, but it just kind of insulted in a way the times that it actually was something warranted, something actually did happen that put someone's health on the line. I thought that was a little disrespectful. But going back to something a little more stupid was the Narcissist debut in 93. It just really shows how, I guess the word would be xenophobic, WWF is at times, because you take someone who was a huge star for the NWA. At that time, people were saying the next Hogan, and yeah, he did go through a lot of injuries going up to his WWF career. He was doing the stupid WBF shit first, which they also pretended never existed.
Ico Pro.
And once again, it's the guy posing with the big muscles, and Bobby Heenan sounds like he's having an org. Oh yeah, look at that. Oh, it's so good. Oh my God.
I think that's what put it over.
Hey, you need Bobby Heenan to pull over or something like that. I mean, if it wasn't for someone talking, you would just be sitting there like, whoop. Is going on there.
But you're just thinking like, that's legal. What are they doing?
Mm-hmm. The year later in 94, a lot of the internet smart marks hate the Undertaker born again in the casket stuff with Marty Jannetty going up into the ceiling in the video and everything. Do you guys think that is on the level of it's too fake, it's too cartoony?
It was a good way to. It was a good way to get them out. It was good for the time. You can look back now; it looks silly.
When I was a kid, I loved it. It was unbelievable. See? It was like a real action comic book coming to life, and that's what WWF used to be back then. Yeah. For the most part, I thought it was great at the time.
Yeah, that was the first time that the babyface Undertaker was getting the big title shot against Yoko, and it took 10 men to finally put him down, and it was almost the rebirth of the Undertaker. Yep. So you got him off TV for a few months, and then Yeah, it's SummerSlam 94.
I think Undertaker gets a lot of leeway when it comes to cartoony character stuff because he's the Undertaker, and fine, if he's the exception, go with it. Like when he sent Edge to hell the other year.
No.
But moving on to some more depths of hell, that brings us to the worst matches. And the first thing I think of is the Scott Steiner Triple H match in 2003.
Oh my God. How many botches were in that match? And you can't really blame Triple H for it.
You can't?
I can't.
But
No.
what was it? Was it a match or was it just a big clusterfuck?
I don't know what it
Botchamania.
was. I don't know. I had friends over and they like stopped watching wrestling after that match.
So you can't blame the ring general for taking a guy who hasn't wrestled in like a year and a half and is injured all the time and says, I'm going to get a 20-minute Ric Flair pay-per-view match out of this guy. You think that was pretty smart?
He's a 13-time world champion. Absolutely.
Yeah,
He can do what he
he'll do it.
wants.
I think Triple H did his best to carry Scott Steiner to a match. It did not work out.
Well, we're going to continue on the Triple H bandwagon. Him and Shawn Michaels, 04. Last man standing, very dull, especially coming off that great match they had at the end of 03. And it had no finish, so to me it had no purpose.
Also in 04 was the Eddie and Chavo match in the undercard. Eddie and Chavo obviously have a history in WCW, and I know we don't care about WCW and WWF, but you know that they were skilled enough to get a good match out of each other for pay-per-view in 04. Just coming off the big Los Guerreros run, which everybody was into, it was awesome. You'd figure Eddie is getting set for the title run coming up at WrestleMania. This will be the feud before that with Kurt Angle segueing into it. And it lasted like 2 minutes. The beatdown afterwards was longer than the match.
I think the idea of that was not really to be a match. I think the whole idea was just to really build Eddie up as he's really, really pissed. And that's why it was the way it was. Could have been a good match, absolutely. It was the way it was booked that really caused that one.
What they were told to do.
Exactly.
Back on the Triple H bandwagon, Triple H Randy Orton from Royal Rumble 2005. What a letdown. This was Triple H squash time on Randy Orton. He killed any momentum that Randy Orton had as a babyface, if any. We're going to build up Batista to have the future title shot, not you.
Well, that match was at the end of the aborted Orton face run after Triple H had thoroughly destroyed any momentum he had, and this was the capper for that. And the story of the match was Orton had a concussion.
Right?
Watching that, I felt like I had a concussion. Let's move on to some of the worst overall shows. Which Royal Rumble, what year really stunk it up?
99. From beginning to end, it just reeks of attitude. I mean, the whole Vince McMahon thing and the Rumble itself is just one big cartoon that I should have changed the channel for.
The undercard also sucked because Rock and Mankind were having a pretty decent stunt show match, but then you had the stupid play the recording of I Quit finish.
Yeah.
And what the fuck is this bullshit? X-Pac's defending the European title against Gangrel. Vampires are European. He should have won it.
Yeah, exactly. 93. Giant Gonzalez come out of nowhere, take out The Undertaker, which didn't make any sense.
That automatically makes it the best.
Yeah. I disagree with you, sir. Savage trying to pin him 1, 2, 3, Yokozuna down. The whole show. Did anyone remember a match on the show besides?
They saw
Razor
him
and
in
Brett?
Earthquake. I thought that was a good moment.
That was a good moment, but the Brett Razor title match didn't live up to some of the later matches they had
No,
either.
Yeah.
Razor wasn't in his prime yet. 2002. Just because of the predictability of it. The card wasn't all that bad, but everybody knew Triple H was going to win that Royal Rumble. And the same with 1998. Everybody knew Stone Cold was going to win the Royal Rumble, but that overall, in my mind, was a better card.
As an overall show, 2004 really stunk it up. Now, of course, we know the Royal Rumble match itself was really great. One of the best they ever had, which, of course, might be tainted by he who we do not speak of killing his family, but that's another thing. Take away that match, the undercard is absolute garbage. It opens up with Ric Flair and Batista in like a 2-minute table match with the Dudleys. Mysterio Jamie Noble match lasted like 2 minutes. Bob Holly and Brock lasted about 5 minutes, which was about appropriate.
Which is good because it was entertaining watching you and Lawrence yell at Bob Holly the whole night.
But we mentioned the Eddie Chavo fight, and then there's also the Triple H Michaels that pretty much underwhelmed itself compared to that great last Raw of December 03 that they had an amazing TV match. This didn't really live up to the hype.
Yeah.
Hopefully we lived up to the hype, though, because we're going to move on to the best of the Royal Rumble when we come back.
Pro Wrestling Respect returns to the Burlington National Guard Armory in Burlington, New Jersey, Sunday, March 14th at 4 p.m. with 8 big matches featuring the graduates of the ROH Academy, mixing it up with experienced veterans. Set to appear are Delirious, Mischief, Daisy Hayes, Ricky Reyes, and more. Cheap tickets are still available. Go to ProWrestlingRespect.com to find out more. Pro Wrestling Respect returns on Sunday, March 14th in Burlington.
Welcome back to the Wrestling Roundtable. Want to talk some more? Upset with YouTube's limits on your comments? Go to our message board. We got big message board going on, lots of people talking, and maybe they'll talk about what we're going to say for the best moments, matches, and overall shows of the Royal Rumble. Moving on to best, joining our panel on my right, which is your left, Derek Shork, fan of 23 years, so you've probably seen every Royal Rumble. What stands out to you as some of the best moments?
When I was a wee lad watching in 1990 when it came down to when they turned around and they met face to face, Hulk Hogan and the Ultimate Warrior, and the place went bananas. The big tease for WrestleMania 6 coming up that year.
I think you're going to find a lot of these moments, worst and best, mostly best, are set to build up to WrestleMania because, of course, it comes a few months later. And Hogan Warrior, that was a great way to start that off. Because how many times did we see two of the big baby faces face off? It was usually heel face, heel face.
And they didn't give you anything in that moment except the face-off. All they did was crisscross the ropes a few times. They hit the double clothesline, and I think it was the Barbarian who came in next.
Well, they collided, so it was kind of
and
even.
they were out.
They didn't have to have Vince McMahon bring out Batista and hot shot the title.
They didn't fight every week on primetime. Maven eliminating The Undertaker in 02. What a surprising moment. This guy, still tough enough Maven. The way that they set it up, I thought it was great, and that was a really shocking moment.
The crowd went fucking apeshit.
Exactly. The Undertaker.
As they should have. It was a perfect star-making moment. If only they had capitalized on it afterwards.
Yeah, they should have.
Undertaker and Shawn Michaels at the end of 2007 Royal Rumble. And that is kind of like Hogan Warrior because they didn't fight in so long. They literally were going back and forth with each other. You didn't know who was going to win. You weren't quite sure. And Undertaker eventually prevailed. That was just a great moment. It really stands out and stands the test of time.
Plus, it also doesn't usually come down to, when it does get down to the last two of the Royal Rumble, it doesn't last too long. And that went about 10 minutes or so. It almost became a one-on-one match in and of itself. And that was pretty cool. But we've been watching a long time. So a lot of my favorites are going to be more closer to my heart, like Hogan and Warrior. And I think of Demolition being numbers 1 and 2 in 1989. It was really emphasizing it's every man for themselves. And the two tag partners who were really over at the time, super hot babyface Demolition, start tearing each other apart. Then Andre the Giant comes in at number 3, and then all of a sudden, like a light switch, they just team up on him. But also Virgil turning on Ted DiBiase in 1991 after all these years of abuse. Huge pop for that once again. Owen Hart turning on Bret Hart in 94, I think also stands out. Because obviously we knew that was coming.
But you didn't know when and how. 10 years later, speaking of build up to WrestleMania, even though the match didn't live up to the hype, I like the whole Goldberg-Brock sequence in Royal Rumble 04. Goldberg coming in, spearing everybody, then Brock came in, F5 into a huge pop, and then you have Angle, of all people, eliminating Goldberg.
Vince McMahon running in at the end of Royal Rumble 2005 and literally tearing both his quadriceps off the bone. Yeah, trying to dive into the ring and then proceeding to cut his promo while sitting down on the mat.
That was hilarious.
That was great. What a moment.
A moment that I was there for in 2008. Not that I'm a John Cena fan, but you saw Jimmy Snuka come out, and you saw Roddy Piper came out, and there was like that anticipation who's going to be number 30. I turned to my brother. I said, Hogan's coming out. Hogan's coming out number 30. But then when the music hit and John Cena, who wasn't supposed to be back for another few months, the place erupted for the surprise. And then it was like,
oh, wait, we're supposed to hate this guy.
Oh, it's John Cena. Yeah, exactly. The whole place started booing again right away because they knew he was going to win.
Eddie Guerrero stealing Ric Flair's number in 2005 was pretty funny. But another big moment that stands out to me is Roddy Piper winning the Intercontinental title in 92. Guy who had never won a title, not even a tag title, in WWF in his entire history. And then he wins it. Huge pop.
Yeah.
And then later on, they had this great segment when Ric Flair was in the midst of the Royal Rumble and he was there by himself. Piper came out. How many kids thought Piper can win both in one night?
Yeah, that would have put Piper over the top.
It was another huge pop, too, for that.
When Orton beat Jeff Hardy, it completely derailed his momentum, and me and you were the only ones in Hooters clapping.
And laughing.
To me, yeah, that was one of the probably the better moments, just because, fuck Jeff Hardy.
One last one before we move on to best matches. Also in 2002, one of the coolest things I ever saw was when Mr. Perfect came in, making his big comeback in 2002 Royal Rumble, and he's in the corner, Austin's tackling him, and in the middle of this, he spits up his gum and hits it, and then gets back to pounding on Austin. That was one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
I still can't do that normally. It's hard, but I get it 1 out of 5 times.
Great nostalgia feel to it.
Oh, yeah.
So, well, that nostalgia feel might be in a lot of these matches that we're going to mention. So let's move on to some of the best matches in Royal Rumble history.
The 2000 WWF title match between Triple H and Mick Foley. when he came back as Cactus Jack.
Cactus Jack.
They brought out the thumbtacks. It's when he took the pedigree on thumbtacks. The Rock came out to save him when he was handcuffed. They played off the 99 handcuff bit. That was when Triple H was really starting to hit his stride and put out match after match, quality main event.
Yeah, I think 2000 was one of Triple H's better years.
Foley really made him in that match, made Triple H.
Right.
I mean, he really made him into a dominant heel, and we're still feeling the effects of that today.
Well, that was the purpose of the match, and it accomplished its mission. Both men did awesome.
Right. 2001, Chris Jericho versus He Who We Do Not Speak Of in a ladder match. It was a phenomenal ladder match for the Intercontinental title. I love the spot where Jericho put him in the walls on top of the ladder. It was a good match. It really got Jericho over and built up those two as future WWF superstars for the world title.
Well,
great.
Speaking of He Who We Do Not Speak Of, or not, he had two classics back-to-back. Obviously, on the show, we mentioned his classic with Angle in 2003. And then the next year, the Royal Rumble match itself, the story was built around him, and it was one of the best Royal Rumble matches I think they ever had, up there with 1992 with Ric Flair's big win for the vacant title.
Rockers vs. Orient Express, the opener. What a great intro to WWF pay-per-view at the time. The match was hot. The crowd was hot. Great way to start off the show. Great display. I thought it was
that match still holds up well today.
Yes. Oh yeah. I think any of those 4 men could still go with any of the guys today.
Well, speaking of cruiserweight style action, I think that match Rey Mysterio Jr. had with Undertaker just last month can probably rank up there. I thought it was a phenomenal match, great match. But also more recently, John Cena and Umaga's last man standing match from a few years ago. We didn't expect anything from that.
Talk about a pleasant surprise.
Yeah,
that was a fantastic match.
They picked up the pieces of that feud and they put on a phenomenal performance using spots that nobody had ever thought of before with the ropes. I loved Umaga running across the tables and putting John Cena through him. It was phenomenal. What a great match.
Well, let's move on to some of the best overall shows. Usually the Royal Rumble, and we didn't have a lot of answers for the worst show. There were only a few that really stood out. But Royal Rumble is generally a fun show. It might be a one-match show at sometimes, but sometimes you also get an entire card of great matches. And to me, the one that stands out for an overall show would be 2000. I think every match pretty much either is decent, if not great, because you got Angle and Taz in the opener. That was a good match. You got Hardys and Dudleys in a table match that ended up being awesome. You also had the street fight, as you mentioned, with Cactus and Triple H, and the Royal Rumble match was fun enough, too. But I think as an overall show, 2000's way up there, Mae Young's tits and all.
I would agree with you on that point, but you did leave out one highlight, and that was Taka Michinoku's face plant when he was thrown over the top rope and smashed his face on the mat, and they kept replaying that
Separated
throughout the
the
rest
shoulder
of the whole night.
I didn't think Royal Rumble 2000 wasn't that great. It wasn't one of the worst, but I wasn't really thrilled with it. But 2003 was one of my favorite shows. Besides the Triple H match, opening with Brock and Big Show, decent match. The Rumble itself.
Brock was tossing him around like a sack of potatoes. He's fucking 7 feet tall.
And then the Royal Rumble match itself,
Yeah.
really good. Really intertwined a lot of different angles and really didn't squash anybody that I could think of at
It's
least.
funny how they put one of the best and one of the worst world title matches back to back on that show.
I personally
the
like
champion was.
2001. I like the fact that Austin was coming off his injury and the build-up was going to start for him versus Rock at WrestleMania.
Rock and Jericho was good.
That was 2002, Rock and Jericho. 2001.
Excuse me.
2001 was when Austin won the Rumble. Yeah, title match was Triple H and Kurt Angle. You had the Stephanie McMahon storyline.
I don't think that title match was that spectacular.
It wasn't. No,
It wasn't the
that
worst.
Great.
It wasn't
it
the
wasn't the
ladder
worst
match
though.
on that.
And the ladder match
card.
I mentioned before. Yeah, so I really liked the Royal Rumble, even with the Drew Carey shit. and Kane. I like Kane's dominance too. He dominated the Rumble, and then
set the
Austin
record
had
that
to use
year.
a chair to eliminate him at the end. They even threw the hardcore division into that match, if you remember. Raven came out with a shopping cart full of weapons.
Haku also was the last guy to jump.
Let's not remind me of that sad moment. But that was in the midst of Austin's comeback from neck surgery in late 2000, which was a great streak that he had. But let's talk about that some more when we come back, because we're going to talk about the best and worst comebacks in wrestling. Ming is a soft spot for me.
I'd have some ongoing joke about eliminating Shelton Benjamin within like seconds of the Royal Rumble. Why do they do that? Why? They think that it's a slap in the face.
You guys
to all
didn't say
his fans.
Santino's elimination. I thought that would be one of your moments.
Well,
Come on!
he was already long gone.
Yeah, he wasn't even in the Rumble this year. They exited him from it before it even happened.
And then Khali getting eliminated by Beth Phoenix.
That was good.
That was actually
That was
That
good.
was-
That
I mean,
should
That
have
was
been.
funny.
That was well done.
It was well, yeah, you did
That was
say
well
that. That was
done.
well done.
It's
If
a,
it's gonna,
it's a funny spin on the Benoit Big Show spot, you gotta admit.
Yeah.
Now, if Benoit
Yeah.
kissed Big Show to get him out, that would be the best thing.
best moment ever.
You know what's funny?
To go to sleep, the Beth Phoenix was kind of sick.
Oh man.
He's grouping him too.
You know,
Play the Big Show.
You know what I hate the most when I watch WWE.com with the best moments like of the Royal Rumble?
Mm-hmm.
That Maven Undertaker thing wasn't even on there. I was like,
Oh,
God,
They stopped caring about
I
it.
can't believe
Not
that. I
gonna
couldn't
put
believe
it
that you could at least put him over. I mean,
it wasn't even like, IC champion middle of the guy. It was the fucking
freaking
Undertaker.
Yeah,
It was the Undertaker. Yeah.
You know how what makes that really stupid? How big he tough enough was? Because you probably had the same thing. People who didn't even watch wrestling were coming up to me like, hey, I watched Tough Enough and they really take some punishment, blah, blah, blah. Maven became a fucking star from MTV,
Yeah.
and then they do that?
What happened? Yeah.
Well, there was a rumor he might actually
one of
win
your
the Intercontinental
guys.
title that year too, and it was like, really? You're gonna really push him this far? That's awesome. And they did nothing with him. And I
No,
remember
you
when
gave him
Evolution
a-
started, they thought about
you
putting him
remember
They
there.
gave him a little something.
and he beat the Undertaker on Raw to win the belt. So that was kind of remember that?
The
Maven?
hardcore belt, right?
Maven, yeah.
Yeah.
I don't remember
Maven-
that.
Yeah, you're right.
Undertaker
He did.
had
He
a match.
was winner. Yeah.
Really?
And
Well,
Maven
come
beat
on,
the
they
Undertaker
could have
on
given him
Raw.
a great rub off that.
You couldn't push the guy more than that.
Big Show.
I mean,
No.
he beat the top one of the top guys.